This meeting is being recorded.
Morning, guys. Thank you for joining today's Movo Academy session, which is everything on events. I've got Tim from Hiscox and Rob, who just started at Hiscox today. So over to you guys, just to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Julie. So for everyone on the call, my name's Tim. I'm one of the development underwriters that looks after the Manchester and Maidenhead regions for the event insurance book here at Hiscox. So pretty much most of you guys are on the call. Anything you have event insurance wise will feed directly into myself first. So I'm sure hopefully over sort of the coming years we will get to know each other very well, which I'm looking forward to. So I've had some good stuff sent over from you guys already. I'll pass over to Rob very briefly to introduce himself on his first day.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Rob Carsley, Hiscox. It's probably the best I can tell you at the moment, but I do know a lot of you at Movo, so excited to see how this goes.
It'll go very well, Rob. Perfect. Thank you for that, Julie. And then just so I know, Julie, just because it's obviously the bar on the top, how many people have we got on at the moment?
Hiscox is offering, if it's a UK event, put it through event insurance.
18. Can I just remind everybody, please, just to mute? I'll just mute that person. Sorry about that. Make sure. Yeah, it's fine. Cool. I think there's 18. I think there was 18.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll get started then. Definitely, that'll be enough.
Right. I presume you were seeing the screen, aren't you?
I am indeed, Julie. Yes, yeah. It's currently just in the overview at the moment, not the full slide.
There we go. My apologies.
Perfect. There we go. Brilliant. So, good morning, guys. Hopefully, everyone's sort of recovered and sort of rested well. I know we obviously had a bank holiday weekend, and some of you guys are probably trying to catch up after the events of yesterday. So we'll do our utmost to keep this to the hour and make sure there's enough time sort of for questions at the end. But yeah, we'll crack on given the time at the moment. So, Judy, do you mind just sort of moving on to the next slide for us, please? So we'll just quickly cover off the agenda for today. Hopefully she'll be pleased. There's only 6 points really that we're going to cover off. So firstly, we'll just give you guys a bit of an introduction to Hiscox event insurance, or who we are, how long we've been doing this for. Then we'll sort of move swiftly on through as to who actually needs event insurance, because that was probably surprised quite a few of you. Bit of an appetite session, our key covers and sort of key underwriting information that we need to actually be able to quote these risks that you guys are going to send over to us. And then sort of we'll give you some example business things that we have written before, and some example claims as well, just to really sort of, bring it to life a bit more for people that aren't too familiar with event insurance. And then obviously at the end, we'll sort of give you guys a bit more information about how we can best sort of work together sort of going forward from today for those that haven't already sort of been in contact with me from there. Perfect. So do you mind just moving on to the next slide for us, please, Julie? Thank you. So bit of an introduction to ourselves. So Hiscox has been in the event insurance sector for sort of 30 plus years. So we do have a considerable amount of experience in it. In terms of our cover, it is fast, it's very flexible. There are sort of various different add-ons, sort of extensions of cover to our sort of cancellation abandonment cover, which we'll cover off later on. Expert knowledge obviously comes with sort of being in this particular sector for 30 plus years or so, but we are also members of the sort of various organisations that you can see on the PowerPoint there, where we've provided sort of training sessions, etc., to the event organisers themselves that are all members of these particular groups. So, and they all know us very well. We are a dedicated team, obviously, in terms of Hiscox, and by that I mean it's not just sort of the event insurance doesn't fall into sort of a wider pool within Hiscox. There are sort of 5 event insurance underwriters in Hiscox UK, plus a colleague of ours that works in Lloyd's for our syndicate doing contingency cover. So whilst we are a small team, this is what we do day in, day out, and we know it like the backs of our hands. So we're sort of just as experienced as the event organisers clients that you will have yourselves. So we will know exactly what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and we can best sort of help guide you to guide them to make sure they've got the right products in place. And the bottom one there, I'm sure some of you that have dealt with Hiscox before, you'll think, oh, we always hang our hat on a claim service, but when it comes to event insurance, we really can. We do have a dedicated claims underwriter specifically for our cancellation and abandonment covers, and the liability claims team are genuinely exceptional when it comes to sort of any liability claims that come from events. So it really is something that we can push on this, because with event organisers, when something happens, it genuinely needs to be rectified as quickly as possible. It could be a simple thing of getting them into the venue on the day, and we can get that sorted. So it's definitely something for you guys to remember on that. Perfect. So next slide, please. So who needs event insurance? Well, first of all, we could just stay on this slide and I could cover everything off all in one, and I could simply say everyone. But I can't just say that. I need to give you guys a bit more detail. But if you just keep that in the forefront of your mind, that everybody will need event insurance at some point, if they're a commercial client or even a private individual, which I will cover off private individuals a bit later on. But as you can all see on the slide in front of you, here are sort of 5 key sort of areas and trades where they will at some point need event insurance for them. So slap bang in the middle is sort of our core appetite. So when you see a slide like this, anything that's in that centre square, that is exactly what we're after. And it seems a bit obvious putting event organisers in there, but that's what we're after. Professional event, sort of conference exhibition organisers, they'll have contractual requirements for public liability. They will be hiring in various amounts of property. You know, they could be spending an astronomical amount on putting these events on, making profit. That's how they make their living. Therefore, straight away, they've got a need for what it is that we can offer. And then as we look around the outside, if we start from the top left, you know, we've got charities and associations. Some of you guys there also, well, what is it they do? Well, charities, how do they physically carry out what it is that they're there for, or fundraising events? Various different associations with annual general meetings, etc. They will all potentially have contractual requirements for public liability. Charities are going to want to protect their income from these fundraising events to allow them to carry on doing what it is that they do. And we move over to the top right, we've got media and publishers. So lots of media firms and publishing companies. You know, from a media perspective out there, a media company could be brought in by their third-party client to organise product launches, etc., and everything for their end client. They may be the one that's responsible for signing venue contracts, etc., and therefore be the ones that are liable and have to take out the insurance on behalf of their end client. That is all something that we can cater for and do. And then businesses, you know, etc., sort of financial industry, IT, law firms, and many more. We all know, I'm sure sort of you guys probably do, you know, we all like to get together, you know, sort of Christmas parties, summer parties, or anything corporate based. We can certainly cater for those as well, sort of at third-party venues, or even if it's sort of your annual launch for your business, or going forward and laying out your goals and your targets for the next year. Again, that is something that may not be covered under a client's generic commercial insurance policy. Hence, where we come in as a specialist, we can plug that gap and make sure there's no sort of grey area as to whether it is or whether it isn't covered. And then marketing and PR companies, very much the same as sort of media and publishers as well. There will be sort of third-party clients that they're working on behalf of to curate an event and put it all together. Again, that's where we can come in and make sure that they've got all the cover in place that they need. And before we move on, what I will state, because I didn't cover it off at the beginning there, is sort of a question policy. I will stop at various points throughout the presentation. So if any of you guys have got questions, just sort of raise your hand or unmute yourself if you can and ask away. But if you think of something really burning that you want to ask, just use the chat function on Zoom, and then when we get to the end, I can literally just go through and answer all the questions that any of you guys have put on there at that point. But as this is a good pertinent pause now, has anybody got any questions on sort of that overall sort of wide appetite view at the moment? I will take the silence as a good key for us to move on. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Julie, if that's okay. Perfect. So let's talk a bit more in depth slightly on to what our actual appetite is. So if you guys get, a submission come in from any of your clients or even sort of commercial clients of yours, and they mention that they're attending an exhibition or they're organising a conference, this here in front of you now is basically what it is we really, really want to look at. So again, slap bang in the middle, conferences and exhibitions. Every single client of yours that is on sort of any commercial book of business that you guys write or place, they will attend conferences. They will potentially attend exhibitions, to keep their brand name out there. We'll do it, and there will potentially be a requirement for, be it just public liability, or they may want to cover off their costs and expenses of attending these events, and that is something we can look to help with. That is our main focus, is conference and exhibitions. But that's not to say that that is all we write. We certainly do write some more interesting risks other than just conferences and exhibitions. So as we move around that circle again, you can see if we start top left and we'll go clockwise again, sort of small to medium festivals like concerts and fetes. So here we're talking sort of music festivals. And when we say small to medium, some people have always asked me, well, what does small to medium mean? Well, because that could mean anything to various different people. So small, if we take those your local sort of music festivals that are on sort of a local recreational field, all the way up to a medium festival, we could still potentially then look to providing cover for an event up to the size of Latitude Music Festival. I mean, it's a festival that has grown exponentially as it's gone on for the years, and it is getting to the point where it may be a bit too big, but something up to the point of Latitude is something, yes, we consider events of that size, and it could be a schedule of festivals of that ilk as well. Sporting events, and agricultural shows, fashion shows, so that could be anything from cricket matches to golf days. We will ensure some football games as well. That's certainly not to say it's Premier League football matches or anything of that calibre. We're talking more local sporting events where then they might be having like a one-day sort of trophy sort of cup or league thing going on. Agricultural shows, we'll do a lot at sort of the 3 counties showgrounds, and fashion shows as well, sort of your catwalk shows. We certainly can have a look at those. And then the awards evenings and product launches. So again, they are great target appetite events for us, award evenings and product launches. Lots of your clients will potentially attend awards evenings or organise themselves for within their own firms. So again, that's something we can certainly look at, and product launches as well. That could be anything. That could be a physical product that you could hold in your hand, something tangible, or if you're talking at an IT firm, if they're launching a new piece of software and they could have hired a small room at the NEC to sort of do a big launch of their new software and talk about it. If you sort of think similar to sort of how Apple used to unveil the new iPhone, those sorts of events, we can certainly look at that. And my favourite one, sort of in the bottom right there, is plus the weird and the wonderful. Again, what does that mean? Well, there are so many different types of events out there, we physically cannot list them all in one presentation. However, by the weird and the wonderful, that literally could be anything. We will always take a look at everything that you guys send through. It may not be a definite yes, but we will certainly try and find a way in which we can best help you guys to help the clients and offer what we are able to. So just to give you guys an example, sort of for the last couple of years, we've insured the Enduro World Series, which is a large mountain biking event, and their section of that takes part here in the UK in Scotland, predominantly for the cancellation and abandonment for it. But the liabilities, that's where it gets a bit different, but there's definitely things we can offer to these clients where it's not your bog standard conference or an agricultural show. It's always worth picking that phone up and just running it past myself or one of the other guys on my team, just to see if it's something we can help you guys out with. So just always bear that in mind. And here's the definite things that we won't look to write here. So if there's anything you guys sort of really do definitely take away from this, if you hear it, still do check, but no, it's more than likely a definite no. So slap bang in the middle, large festivals such as Glastonbury, that is the sort of thing. If you get anything of that sort of size, that's definitely better suited to a sort of subscription-based market, in Lloyd's. It's unlikely that you'll get many of those sort of types of events of that size and nature come in, but if you do see something like that, it's unlikely that myself or somebody on my direct team here in the UK can assist with something that large, just due to the complex covers that they will need written within it. There are separate wordings out there in markets that are better suited for events of that size. And then sort of nightclubs, sort of parties for younger persons. I mean, I'll go out on a whim here and probably say I'm one of the youngest people on the room here, but it's certainly not the sort of things that we would want to look at insuring there, just due to the types of events that are normally held in nightclubs, the amount of alcohol that can be consumed, and it tends to lead to a lot of issues, and there's a lot of other parties involved, so it can make it very difficult when it gets to a claims point of view as to who's actually liable for it. And we've got liability for contact sports. So this is something that is in our wordings. We certainly don't want to be picking up any liability for sort of player-to-player injury for rugby matches, any sort of taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, karate, anything that's high impact or contact sport. We tend not to write the liability for it. Certainly not covering the actual participants anyway. It may be something that we can consider providing liability cover for the spectators, but if they're after cover for the actual participants, that's a definite no from us. And then event contractors and venue owners, it's out of appetite more from a point of view that our product is not suitable for them. They will need their own specific commercial insurance for them as event contractors. So if we picture now sort of AV and lighting installers, technicians, they will have their own commercial insurance policies. And the same for venue owners and operators. They should have their own commercial venue operators commercial policy, whereas our wordings are specifically designed for the organisers of the event themselves, which sort of sits alongside the venue owners, the contractors, and gives them that overarching coverage as the main event organizer. And tour operators liability as well. It's something we just Hiscox wide, we don't have any appetite to write any tour operators liability. Again, that's because there are specific markets that are out there for there. And when we talk about tour operators, if they're involved in putting an event on, they are pretty much straight away on for any claim that gets that comes into them if they are the ones that have organised that. There's no real rights of recourse potentially on there, and it's just something we steer very, very clear of on the event insurance team and the rest of Hiscox as well. So before we move on, I'll just ask again, has anybody got any questions on sort of what's in appetite, what's out of appetite, even if potentially you've had a meeting with a client recently, even if it was a couple of months ago and they mentioned something to you, then you might be wondering if it's something we can potentially help out with, or even an example of a type of event that's not been mentioned that I can answer now for you guys. If you have, feel free to unmute yourselves if you can, or stick it in the chat and we can cover it off at the end.
Tim, if I throw a question out, what's
Yeah,
your sort of limit indemnities that you write to on your PL?
So on the PL, so we can write up to 10 million, sort of on the PL, sort of on a single line. There will certainly be requests from various different venues, especially if you look to Ireland, is a key one, and some of the larger sort of well-known venues in the UK, such as the NEC and the Excel. We know they will always request that their organisers have 10 million PL limit minimum, just as the main organizer. Occasionally, depending on the event, they may request a £20 million line, which we can't really do at Hiscox. So we'll write 10 mil and the brokers have to go out and get an excess layer for it. We don't look to write excess layers typically here either. However, there is a caveat. This is one of the wonderful things about event insurance, guys, is it's not always a clear cut and no. Each event, it could be both conferences, but everything will be different in some ways, which will change the way how we can look at writing that particular event. there may potentially be, depending on the size of the event and who the client is and contractual requirements, where we may be able to get some reinsurance to increase it, but that is incredibly unlikely. There is 2 or 3 clients off the top of my head that I think where we've done that, but they are clients that have been with us from day one when it was a small event, and it's just grown into a large international conference, and it takes place around the world, and it goes outside of our remit and our team. But typically it's up to a 10 million line from there. But you'll find, guys, that the contract requirements from the venues will tend to stipulate what PL limit the organisers need to have, and if they don't, we can write up to a 10 mil line. But obviously if they don't need that, you can talk to us and we can talk you guys through what we've seen typically for these types of events. Obviously we can't advise you guys on what the client should or shouldn't have, but we can certainly let you guys know what we've seen given the vast experience that we have in this particular sector going forward on there. Happy with that, Rob? Cool, no worries. Can I get you to move on, Julie? There's no other questions at the moment. So event insurance, well, what is it we cover? So if I get you to move on to the next slide for us, please, Julie. So we will provide cover for the cancellation and abandonment of the event. And next to that, you'll see that we've got terrorism, key person, reduced attendance, adverse weather, and national mourning, which is very pertinent to what we've all just gone through. The cancellation and abandonment cover is there to provide protection for the expenses and profit associated with putting an event on, and it will kick in if the event is cancelled, curtailed, postponed, or potentially even relocated due to an unforeseen circumstance that is outside of the organiser's control. The main insuring clause on any cancellation abandonment policy is that it needs to be necessarily and unavoidably cancelled, curtailed, etc. for it to be triggered. So from on that, I'll give you guys some claims examples later on, which will sort of bring it to light and think, oh, never would have thought of that. But the standard cancellation abandonment cover tends to be very venue centric and is based around the exposures at the venue itself. But then next to it, all those other keywords that you can see there, they're all the additions of cover that we can look to add on and tailor that particular product to suit your client's needs best. So terrorism cover is one that it's taken up on a large proportion of cancellation abandonment policies. And we can cover that sort of just the act of terrorism as well as the act and threat of terrorism occurring, and it's normally given on what is known as a time and distance basis. So we'll effectively take the venue and drop a radius around it, and it could be up to 50 miles away from the venue. A terrorist incident occurs and the cover is triggered, because it could be that the venue has to be evacuated due to the local authority saying, right, every venue of over X number of attendees or capacity has to be evacuated for the safety of those involved. And that goes for the threat of terrorism as well. As long as it's confirmed threat of terrorism, again, that's something we can cater for, and we can make that as wide or as narrow as we need to, sort of in the grand scheme of things. So it could be an international event and there could be attendees traveling from all over the globe, and we could be looking to pick up terrorism incidents at different airports around the world, even though the event could be taking place in Paris, but you could have people coming from the US, India, Portugal, Spain, etc. And we can look to be covering the terrorist risk in those particular countries, not just in the location of the event itself. Key person cover, so that could be anything from keynote speakers at conferences, or sort of general talks, all the way up to performers as well. So a lot of sort of more corporate parties, people tend to, or even the music festivals, there may be sort of 1 or 2 sort of key headline acts that are performing at the event, and we can look to cover their non-appearance as a key person. Various different things come into that, and if any of you guys do want more of an in-depth training session on these extensions, do let Julie know, and we can certainly organise that, because it's quite a big one, key person. Reduced attendance cover is another sort of key cover that tends to be taken up an awful lot as well, and it's worth mentioning because this is something that a lot of clients do get quite concerned about. This effectively it's more for a catastrophic reduction to the attendance of the event, and it's normally given via sort of percentage triggers. So it could be 60% of your total attendees that are due to turn up at the event. They're unable to get there due to one sole identifiable reason, and that could be transport strikes that aren't known on the day, and then or it could be sort of adverse weather kicking in and the event's indoors, or just down to a horrible sort of RTA on sort of the main motorways feeding into the city and people can't get there. That's the sort of thing that we can cover under that. And then adverse weather cover, this is specifically for events that are held outdoors or in temporary structures such as marquees, tents or stretch tents. We cover automatically under the cancellation abandonment wording adverse weather for events that take place indoors. Some of you might be sitting there sort of scratching your heads going, well, what does it matter if it's indoors inside a permanent venue? Well, if there was a freak snowstorm or a weather system sort of coming in and the advice was not to travel due to the safety of sort of being on the roads, etc., but the event was inside at the Excel Centre, that adverse weather cover triggers the rest of the cancellation policy, and that's in there. We only have to look at writing it back in if the event's physically taking place outside. And then national mourning. Obviously, we know we've just lost Her Majesty the Queen. We do give some cover for national mourning as standard in our cancellation wording, but it is only for persons up to the age of 75. So King Charles III is now included as standard in our cancellation abandonment wording, but previously, sort of going back a few years, if people wanted cover for the Queen, they would have to provide us with a supplementary questionnaire, and we would have to sort of underwrite that and write that particular cover back in. Again, it's something that will probably become more pertinent again as the years go on from now, but it is something that we can consider and definitely worth asking about. And obviously public liability. So a lot of you guys would be sitting there wondering, well, some of our clients have got PL under their sort of office policy. That is exactly what it is. You'll find a lot of it is specific to their office risk and their office location, and not many markets will extend that PL to cover them whilst they're attending somebody else's event or organising an event themselves. That's where we come in. This is the full event liability cover for them organising that event. So it also acts as that sort of contingent cover should there be any subcontractors that are hired into the event and their policies fail with a claims brought against them, or ours is also there to pick it up and protect our organiser. And the same for employers' liability. There could be lots of freelancers, volunteers, etc. coming in that need to be covered under an EL product, which won't then in turn be covered under a commercial insurance policy. Again, that's where we can come in, and also some commercial policies won't tend to extend the employer's liability cover for that business's employees attending an event that they're organising on behalf of their business. Might sound a bit funny, but it does tend to be something that happens around the market, is they're covering them for specific business activities that was disclosed to the underwriter at the time of writing that commercial risk, not turning up at an event and could be clerical risk, or even if it's light manual work, they won't look to cover it. That's where we can come in again. And then property cover, as I mentioned at the start, so lots of event organisers will potentially be hiring in large amounts of property, or even if it's just a few tables and chairs, they may be contractually required by the hiring company to insure that property whilst it's in their care, custody and control. We can certainly look to cover all of that, and that will range from anything from tables and chairs all the way up to their sort of high-end public address systems, the lights, moving heads, all the way then through from toilet blocks, shower blocks, down to quad bikes, golf buggies, etc., that are used to ferry people around the event sites. There is not much from a property point of view that we cannot cover or won't look to cover. And we've got a lot of experience on the team within the business as well for large property sums insured. And we can obviously write property as a standalone cover as well. So if it's just a simple thing like that, everything's covered off elsewhere under commercial policy, but they won't extend to cover the property, give us a call. It's something we can certainly consider. And we do have a separate wording for money cover, and this is for physical cash held at the event site and location. Be honest, we tend not to write large sums insured for money cover. However, it is something we do have. As we sort of move to, we could probably say it's more of a cashless society, there are still a lot of things at events that will take physical cash. we certainly won't look to cover anything that subcontractors, if you're talking food vendors, etc., at Fates are taking, that's on them. But if there's sort of ticket money being collected on the door, etc., and there's cash there, we can look to insure that as well, and that's sort of from sort of theft, etc., from that cash there. But again, it's an extra cover that we can look to add into the wider policy. And Colin, I can see you've put a question on the chat. What I'll do is we'll move on just because of the time, and I'll make sure I get to your question at the very end of it. But it's a good question. Thanks for that, Colin. Julie, can I get you just to move on to the next slide for me, please? Perfect. So some key information. This here, guys, is what we will need from you guys in order to at least give you guys a very good indication of terms for an event that you guys have got. And then sort of prior to a profit, if you guys do need a quick turnaround, we will certainly do what we can, because we can quote subject to a statement of fact. And we need very little information really to be able to give you guys an indication and confirm it up, make it contract certain a bit later on. So there's only sort of 3 points written there. Firstly, the most important thing for me and sort of any other underwriter here at Hiscox is firstly, who is the insured? We need to know who they are and sort of what their involvement is in this event. Are they organising it? Are they attending somebody else's event as an exhibitor? We need to know that information. And then it's a simple what, where, and when is the event taking place. So again, what type of event it is, where is it happening, geographically, then narrow it down into the city, and then the venue, which they should have, and the dates of that event as well. Because without the dates, we could certainly give you a quote and give you a policy for it, but it won't be covering the actual event itself. So we'd have to know the event dates for it. If it's a bit of a way off, don't worry, you just need an indication or some terms that they can send to the client. As long as you've got a date range, we could certainly do that and narrow it down as we get close to the event. But we do need to know roughly when that event is as well. And then the costs and expenses, so plus the profit if they do want to look at insuring the profit. That's only applicable if they do want to look at covering the cancellation and abandonment of the event. But even if they've not mentioned it to you, but you can get that information, you know, it's a good indicator to us, you know, if they're spending sort of £250,000 or more, you know, that they may not have considered cancellation and abandonment cover. And it's always worth posing that question to your clients then, if they are spending a considerable amount on it, or even if it's a lower amount, but it's a smaller business or a local committee, it's just asking, well, where are you going to get that money back from if the event is cancelled? And a lot of people now, as we come out of the pandemic, you know, everyone is sort of clutching at straws and keeping the purse strings nice and tight. It's certainly something that people are more in tune with and wanting to look to protect more than ever now, especially if they are dropping a large sum of money on an event. It's something we can look to cover. We can certainly then get together with you and sort of talk you guys through, like, these are the benefits of them insuring it. And you can always go back to the client and it may be something that they then go, yeah, we do want to quote for that. Perfect. Next slide for me, please, Julie. But if the event is large or small, always ask what could go wrong. That's another thing you guys have to take back from this and mention to your clients there is, regardless of the size of that event, you have to get the client to ask themselves what could go wrong. And that leads or segues rather nicely into some claims examples that I've got for you guys here, which hopefully then brings it to life for you guys. So a few things here then. So Hurricane Irma, I think we all remember when that hit. The whole state of emergency was called, and the whole state of Florida was closed. There were a number of events that we insured in Florida on the team here, and they did have adverse weather cover on them, and Hurricane Irma hit, the events were cancelled, no one could get in, out the state, nothing was open. That's where our policy kicked in and then sort of paid the costs and expenses to that particular client of ours to reorganise that event when it was then safe to do so next, or relocate it if they weren't then already out there in the state of Florida. We found a suitable venue for them and they could hold the event. Fire, so this here could be fire, could be flood, could be electrical damage, all at a venue. And this particular example, there was a fire. So a fire took place at the venue prior to the event, making it unusable. So this particular instance, the fire took hold of the venue. I think it was a good sort of 2 weeks prior to the event actually happening. but there was considerable fire damage. It was unsafe for people to be inside the building working on it while repairs were made. Again, thankfully they had cancellation abandonment insurance, and what we did is we sourced them an alternative venue within the same city of a similar standard and capacity, so the event could still take place with minimal impact. This is not the exact locations, but it'd be the difference between sort of having your event at 122 Bishopsgate in London just by Liverpool Street and it moving 25 metres down the road. That's sort of what we can do. If we can aim for that, we will, but we'll certainly then look to try and find an alternative venue within the same geographical area if possible to keep that event running. That's what the cover's there for. Keep the event running to provide minimal impact to the insured themselves. If it's not possible, that's fine. That again is what we're here for. If we go to the bottom right, because we'll leave the bottom left one to the end, because it's one of my favourites. It's a little bit dark, but it is one of those things as what could go wrong, and they never thought of that. But again, a transport issue causing reduced attendance. So this here was delays at sort of various different travel hubs, all caused by one particular circumstance, which led to, it was around sort of 70% of the total attendees not making it to the venue on time, so the event was cancelled. That's a real life example of our catastrophic and forced reduced attendance cover that we can write back in. And then my favourite, really, and I promise I'm not a dark and twisted person, honestly, guys, I promise, but a homicide. So a murder caused denial of access to an event organiser's venue. This horrific crime didn't actually take place in the client's venue. It actually happened 2 doors down from the venue. But the organiser turned up on the day of their event and the roads were all shut off by the police. They couldn't get down there. They couldn't get into the venue. None of the venue staff could to get the event set up. So the event was subsequently cancelled just because they couldn't get into the venue. The venue itself was absolutely fine. There was no damage to that. Nothing had taken place in the venue, but something had happened next door to it, completely unrelated to the event, but the local authorities shut the roads and they couldn't get into it. And that's something where I can't imagine any event organisers ever woken up on the day of their event and thought, I'm not going to be allowed to set up because somebody's been murdered 2 doors down from the event site, and they didn't find out till they got there. It's a weird scenario there, but it did happen, and we were there to reorganise that event for the client. They organised it sort of a couple of weeks later in conjunction with the venue, and it went ahead with no issues. So again, it was really good. I appreciate all of those claims examples are more cancellation and abandonment focused, because I'm sure a lot of you guys have got some examples that you've already come across sort of from a PL perspective, but just in case you don't, the PL there claims examples we typically see on the events book are your various slips, trips and falls taking part in an event. It could be tripping over cables that the organisers not sort of taped and marked down properly, all the way to the third party property damage that's covered under the public liability. We did have a claim for a chaise lounge, if I've pronounced that correctly, at a stately home, where an attendee had one too many glasses of wine and fell into it and ripped the furniture. So we paid out for that to be repaired and replaced there, because it was deemed to be the negligence of the event organiser that they had allowed their attendees to go into that particular room. Again, just another example for you. Who thinks somebody's going to do that at their event? But it does happen. Perfect. Next slide, please, Julie. So going forward, this is what we're going to hopefully try and achieve with you guys, or we certainly will do, is any events business that you guys have that comes in, even if it's an inkling that you're not too sure on it, just get in contact with us. Even if you're unsure on the appetite or whether it is actually an events exposure itself, you can always pick up the phone, and if you don't get through to myself directly, you will get through to somebody else on the team that I work on. Alternatively, you can just send me an email, and then I will certainly get back to you on whether that is, and we can organise a call to talk through it, and I can try and point you in the right direction if it's not an events exposure. We're definitely happy to give more specific training if required, because I appreciate this is a very sort of high level overview, and there are various different topics that we could really sort of dive down the rabbit hole in with events insurance. So if any of you guys do want anything more specific, I'm sure, Julie, I hope you don't mind me offering your services, but time with Julie and we can certainly get that organised. we can provide you guys with the proposal forms, the wordings and policy summaries for you guys to go through. And I've already spoken with Julie on this. They'll be sent over and should be uploaded hopefully to Movo Buddy, so you guys can all sort of get hold of them as and when you need them. And we are also more than happy to attend client meetings if it's appropriate, be that physically or virtually. It's certainly something we can do. You know, if it's tends to be a small event, it may not be that it's appropriate for us to be there. But if there's a particularly sort of largest sort of conference exhibition that one of your clients is organising, and they want to get in front and sort of talk to us with you guys there as well, then that's something we're more than happy to do if we're able to do it. And then lastly, this is something that we will put a separate session in for, is use of our event insurance website. So what I can do is I can set all of you up here, sort of all of you members of Movo, with individual logins to our event insurance specific website, where you can put your sort of small, simple business through, and you will still get your commission paid to you guys as well on there. It's going to be one of the quickest ways for you guys to get a quote for sort of the smaller business, rather than having to get a proposal form filled out, send it into us, we'll quote it, send it back, and you go back to the client. It's a very good platform where you can enter all the information yourself, and as long as it doesn't cause a referral trigger, it will provide you with a quote immediately, and then you've got that quote document that you can send straight off to the client. You know, you're happy with this, and you can bind it yourself. You're also able to make midterm adjustments to it. You will shortly be able to get annual policies on there as well from a liability point of view. It is a great little portal, but what we will do is we will get some official training rolled out to you guys on that, so what's best suited for that particular platform, and how to use it best. But if you do have any issues after that, again, you can always pick up the phone and ask us, and we can talk you through anything if needs be. And next slide, please, Julie. And who to contact. So initially, guys, you guys will all feed in and sort of primarily deal with myself. So here is my contact details. I know Julie's going to sort of turn this PowerPoint into a PDF and send it out to you all. There's my email address and my direct dial here in the office. As you guys fall into our Maidenhead region that I take ownership of, it will be me primarily that you deal with, in short. But there are other members of my team that can help you just as well as I can. So if I'm not around, you can certainly talk to them, and they will certainly do everything they can, just as I will, to get things turned around for you. What I will do following on from this is I will send to Julie a wider contact sheet with everybody else's contact information on there, just in case if it is needed, and I'm not around or you can't get hold of me, you then know who else to contact on the team, and you can see the various different regions that they fall into. But I will be your sort of first port of call, so don't be afraid to pick up the phone, drop me an email, pester me as much as you want. I'm more than happy for long phone calls and email exchanges, etc., whatever suits you guys best. So that is it, a quick whistle-stop tour of events insurance. Appreciate there is a lot of information that has been sort of belt fed out to you guys, but there is a lot that we could cover off, and that, you know, we can certainly go deeper into, as I mentioned. But has anybody got any additional questions for me? No matter what they are, there's no such thing as a stupid question, and I know we've all heard that before, but there honestly isn't when it comes to event insurance.
Hi, Tim, it's Rob Cockle here. I've got a few questions, actually, sorry. And apologies, I was a bit distracted, so if you've covered it, I'm just about to embarrass myself. I'll get my excuses in advance. With reduced attendance, you talked about a strike and said it was an unknown event. Is it strictly unknown at the point at which they take the contract out, and as long as that's okay, we're good? Or if somebody takes out an event insurance 3 months away, and then 2 weeks later that says, oh, there's going to be a strike on that date, would you expect them to rearrange it and not make a claim, or would that be a...
No, so that is something that we can do. So what wasn't mentioned on there is our strike, sort of our riot, strike, and industrial action sort of additional covers that we can look to write back as well. We're sort of currently reviewing them a little bit more at the moment, just in terms of our own approach to them, but that is an additional cover that we have as well. So in your example, Rob, just correct me if I misheard it there. So you're saying if an insured was to take out a policy with us sort of a few months in advance, and then a month leading up to their event, a strike is sort of made public. So we know, for example, on the 15th of December, the Transport for London are going to strike again, and that's going to cause an impact to the event effectively. That is something we can cover, yes. They would need to also have that additional extension written back in as the strike and industrial action cover written back into that. However, it's not necessarily mentioned on there because we do give strike and industrial action cover as standard in the cancellation wording, as long as that policy is purchased 90 days before the first date of that event. So we know then, it's certainly not something that, like with the recent strikes we've seen there, a lot of people were interested in having the cover because they were organising an event on the day of a train strike with the venue literally on the day that they're talking to us as well. So they know their event's going to be impacted in some way. As long as it's not necessarily a known circumstance, then yes, we can cover it. Even if we know well enough in advance that there are those potential strikes coming on, or there could be extra strikes that carry on after that initial date and the insured's concerned that it might drag on longer than it's expected, we can still look to write that cover back in for them. And then that'd be the strike cover that we can offer that would tie in with that reduced attendance cover as well. So they'd work together to trigger that policy. But in short, it is something we can look to consider and we can write for them. And that 90 days is specifically in the UK. If it's anything past that 90 days, we need to get more information on it, and then we write it back into the policy. But we can also offer strikes in that worldwide as well. If there's sort of wider exposure for international events, it's something we can certainly cover.
Great, that's a very full answer, thank you. Public liability, does that include contingent products liability for, I don't know, you've got a hot dog seller that's not got insurance?
Fair enough.
And also, that leads into the next question, my last one, which is what checking of subcontractors covers is required for event organisers?
Cool, good question there. So from the sort of the products liability, so what within our wordings, and again, when I send these over to Julie, I'll put a bit of text on there so you guys know what wording is for what, and the same for the proposal form. So the majority of what you guys will probably request from us will be known as our short period public liability wording, which is more for sort of for one-off events, or if there's a large schedule of events and it's not fit for an annual policy, it will still be on the same PL wording. The products liability on that is very limited to just food and drink supplied at the event, and that is food and drink that the organizer supplies themselves. So that could be anything from teas, coffees, cakes, it could be a little bit more than that. We will provide cover. From a contingent point of view, let's say, as you mentioned there in your example, you've got a hot dog seller that's, food vendor that's there, could be burgers, whatever, and their insurance policy fails for whatever reason. Let's say, someone gets really bad food poisoning, and somehow they're trying to claim for more than $1 million, which is unlikely, but some food vendors may only have up to $1 million PL. Our policy would kick in on a contingent basis, to then sort of help pay the rest of that. But there isn't any other products liability from the organiser's point of view, such as if they were to be developing gas barbecues and they were at an exhibition, or they were organising their product launch and one of their barbecues exploded and injured the attendees there, we'd expect that to be covered under a commercial policy that gives them that full product liability for that sort of design, build and manufacturing work that they're carrying out. That's sort of where the line is drawn from a products liability perspective on RPL. In terms of checking what the subcontractors have, so there is nothing official that we say they must have a minimum of X under their PL limit. We certainly can stipulate that. That tends to be depending on the size of event. So if there is a large, it could be agricultural show, large exhibition at the NEC, and we know there's lots of different third parties involved, and depending on what they are, what activities they're physically carrying out, we will then tend to put an exclusion on there, which is a subcontractor's exclusion that states they must have a minimum of 5 million PL or 10 mil. We can set that limit ourselves. but officially there isn't anything. We just ask the question, and it's on our proposal forms, is have you, the organiser, checked that all contractors or bona fide subcontractors have their own insurance in place? And it could be for various different activities on there, but it does ask that one. If anybody ever does come back and say, yeah, we've checked, but there's one or two contractors that don't have their own insurance, we tend to just dive a little bit deeper. It doesn't mean we won't offer our insured the PL. It will be that we will then look at that. We'll make it obviously known that our coverage is specifically for the event organizer. It's not providing that cover to that party that doesn't have their own insurance. But we know that if a claim is brought against them, they don't have their insurance for their entity, 9 times out of 10, it's then going to fall onto the event organizer. They could effectively be deemed negligent for allowing that contractor on site to their event without having PL. So we know that we're then effectively picking up that risk ourselves. So we may just then look to re-rate it, all depending on what that contractor is actually doing. If it's something incredibly hazardous, we'd probably then look to say to you guys, well, has the insured considered finding another contractor that's a bit more suitable and reputable for that particular activity? But it's not straight no, but it's something that is disclosed, and it's only really if we go to look further down the line and find out exactly what limits they have, we may ask it, but it is unlikely. It'll be for sort of more like stunt performers, etc., that are at events. We might want to know that they've got a full 10 mil limit if we're giving 10 mil. But yeah, there's nothing hard set in stone where they must have, and they must check that they've all got 10 5 mil unless it's put in the quote schedule, and we'll make you guys aware of that.
Can I ask another one, or are we run out of time?
You're fine,
No.
Rob. Carry on.
So just dredging the memory banks, I had a circumstance where I had an event organizer in a conference center, and they had a food vendor there, and the food vendor got into a lot of trouble with the Food Standards Agency, and the Food Standards Agency's response was, "We're going to shut you down," which is, I was looking interestedly from the sidelines, thinking fair enough, until I realized that they were talking about shutting down the conference center. Is that still? Eventually, we negotiated our way out of it, and the underwriters would make it quite clear they weren't going to pick up the claim if the conference centre was closed. But is this a thing? Was it just unlucky with that one, or was that a thing?
I'll be honest. In my personal experience, I've not heard of that one myself, or that happening. So I'll take it. In that particular scenario, was the food vendor contracted in by your client that was organising the event?
It was, yeah. They bought a license, a pitch at the venue on a 6-monthly basis. I think a 6-month lease.
Okay, so I mean, I've not heard of that one or anything like that happening specifically, because I would say normally if it's one sole food vendor, what I would tend to expect is to go, well, that food vendor is no longer allowed to trade, and they're no longer there on that event site. They can get somebody else in, and depending obviously on how serious that is, obviously we don't know the full issues. If there's something where they've potentially contaminated the whole venue and the venue needs to be shut down, I'd say it's probably unlikely it was that severe. But I've not heard of that one. I mean, it's nice to hear that they were able to you were able to negotiate your way out of it, and the event was still to go ahead. I would say, yeah, I've not heard of that one personally. And I suppose how we would look at it, that would all depend on the day and the exact information we get in, and then our claims underwriter, he would then obviously look at that from a cancellation point of view, and then we'd have the conversation when we've got the full information. But from the information you said there, I've not heard of that happening before previously. No.
Okay, I'm just curious. Thanks.
The venue it specifically said, yeah, you're going to shut, which is odd, but no, it is an interesting one, that one. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Hi, Tim. Colin from Glasgow. Sorry, I know we're running short of time, so I'll be quick.
That's all right.
Just the first question that I sent you earlier on, the cancellation cover, is that a core section or is that optional?
So yeah, good question on that one, Colin. So the cancellation abandonment cover, it is an optional cover. So to access our public liability, with the EL, the property and the money, they don't have to have the cancellation abandonment cover. It's short answer, no, it's not a core cover. However, that is one of the things we do specialise in. So we can definitely add benefit to it, but the client does not have to take that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this product the same one that's available directly to customers from Hiscox as well? So I got an inquiry last week from an event organizer, and I thought absolutely perfect. We've got this event today. Transpires it's Hiscox Online that she uses, but it's just purely liability cover that she's got. So I'd be looking to speak to her about the cancellation, property, etc. Does the fact that she's already insured with Hiscox directly, does that preclude you from looking at it? If I was to...
Yeah, so no, it doesn't. So if they've gone on to our event insurance website and they've purchased their public liability through the website, if this client then comes in to you and sort of is talking to you about the cancellation ban, that doesn't stop me looking at it with you alongside that at all. It will be the same product. So on the event insurance website, that is the only way we can deal with clients directly at the moment on the event insurance team. We used to deal with them here in the office ourselves, but I think it was sort of a good 18 months ago we took the decision to move away from that as our team became smaller. So they broke a focus because there was, especially with the pandemic and everything going on there, regardless really of the size of the event, a lot of organisers can certainly benefit from what you guys can offer to your clients. Really is that advice, different markets, going here, going there, and laying these covers out to them. So the website was designed with the direct customer in mind, so they can put through their small events there. And if it gets to a certain size, we then direct them that you should probably go to a brokerage. But it's all the same wordings on there. So when you guys are set up on the website, it will be exactly the same as what you would get from the website, Colin, as to if you came to me directly and we did something via email. It's all the same wordings. The only difference is doing it with me off of the website. That's where we can tailor it a bit more in terms of those additional covers. So you can get a few extensions of cover on the website, but when we talk more about strike and adverse weather, if the sums insured get to a certain point, that's where we need myself, one of my other colleagues, to actually look at that and underwrite it rather than allow the website to do it. But it certainly won't stop me looking at it with you. Even if it was a thing of, if the client still wanted to go and use the website directly themselves, but they were asking you to talk them through some things and you were going to charge them a fee, for example, just for sort of the advice on what they're getting from the website, I can certainly have the conversations with you on that. That's not a problem. At which point it may be better that they allow you to take over and put it through the website yourself, or we do it offline via a proposal form, depending on what it is.
Smashing, thank you.
No worries. What I will just add on to a last point on that cancellation abandonment. So all of those extensions of cover that I mentioned throughout the presentation on there, in order to have those extensions, as they are an extension, you do need to have the standard cancellation abandonment cover, as well as then look to get the terrorism. We can't just write terrorism cover on its own or adverse weather cover on its own. That standard underlying cancellation cover for the venue, etc., has to be purchased with it, and everything builds up away from that. Just if any of you guys were wondering that.
That's excellent. Has anybody else got any more questions? They're all so scared.
Actually, can I just ask one? This is definitely the last one that will
You're
ask.
Fine, Colin. Fire away.
You were mentioning earlier on that this policy is purely for events. So an event organizer, that's for their business. So if I'm understanding it correctly, the EL cover under the events policy would purely apply to employees that are at the events, and they would need to have a separate office policy to provide the EL cover for the people that are working in the office then.
Correct. So I'll say correct, and again, this would be the one thing that you may end up pulling your hair about with event insurance, but again, that's why I'm here, and you can always talk to me. So from our short period EL wording, yes, that is 100% correct, Colin. So it will only insure those employees whilst they're at that particular event. We do have an annual liability offering, which can literally cater for a full 12-month period for any events that the client organises over those 12 months. And it's done on a declaration basis, and that's more applicable to organisers, professional event organisers or businesses where they hold, let's say, sort of 10 or more events a year and they need the PL cover for it, we can certainly do that. The benefit of that particular cover is depending on what their office risk is and what their day-to-day business activities are. If it's purely clerical, we can then look to extend the PL and EL to cover their office risk. But as soon as you move away from anything that's office-based, professional event organisers going to their office on their laptop, Zoom meetings, site visits to venues, that sort of stuff we can cover under that annual one for their office risk as well. But if it was anything else, let's say if you had an IT firm, a design and construction business, we certainly wouldn't want to be picking up the EL on an annual basis to cover their main business activities under that. So it varies, but it's better off to say, unless it's a professional event organizer, yes, they need that separate event, separate employees liability cover.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Well, thank you very much, Tim. I think that was very, very, very informative. I don't know what everybody else thought, but thank you very much. I'll stop the recording right now.